All right, so finally, let's start some compositing. This is Maya Composite 2011, not to be confused with Maya Toxic 2010, which was in the Maya 2010 package. Maya 2011 has a new updated package that's been renamed from Maya Toxic to what is now Maya Composite, and I'm assuming it's going to stay that way. If we want to create a new scene, I'll go ahead up to File, New Scene, and I'm going to go ahead and place this under Live Action, under Composite Files, and we'll go ahead and call this shot to comp and say create. And I'm just overwriting the same one I have saved there. And that's what we have here right now. And you start out with an output node. You also have an output as far as what you want, as far as what you're going to render out in the end. So we can go ahead and set that up. So if I kind of click on this, you can kind of see that it has a setting of 2048 by 1556. Let's go ahead and change that to what our eventual output is, will be 1280 by 720. Again, this is a nodal-based system. It is not by any means a stack system like After Effects, and it's really a step into the direction of nonlinear workstations such as Shake or such as Nuke. And this to me is a great little addition to the Autodesk family that lets people get started very easily in compositing advanced networks and trees. So the next thing we want to do here is we want to start importing some stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and do File, Import, and we're going to go ahead again and jump under Live Action, and we're going to go under our rendered files, which will be under Passes. And here's our Shot 2 renders. And here is our body. So I'll go ahead and click on the body, and here is our attack EXR, and I'll say Import. And it might look like nothing happened, but actually something did happen over here. So I can import a whole series of these, but I'm going to just start with these for now. So here's my attack. And if I take a look at it, and to take a look at it, there's two ways of kind of looking at things inside of the composite. One is by using whatever node you have attached to be displayed. And if you come to your view window here and right click, you have what I usually use, either C1 or tool output. Now tool output means whatever you have selected will be displayed. Now the other thing you can do is go ahead and right click and say display C1 output. And as you can see, it renders black right now. And the reason why is we don't have anything assigned to the C1 output. So in order to do that, I'll go ahead and tap 1 for any one of these. So I'll hold down 1 on my keyboard and left mouse button click. Now, whatever I go to, no matter what I'm selected, it's going to remain on this. And I'll show you how this comes in handy later on. So I can switch this to holding down 1 and go to the output. If I want to, I can come over here and drag a noodle to the output. And now the pipeline is as here. And I can make changes to this, but it will just stick with what we have here. To disengage this, just hold down 1 and tap anywhere outside. And then you'll be back to where you were. So I'm going to grab my little noodle and go ahead and disconnect it. And let's start building our network. Now, since this is an EXR file, if we go under Options, you'll see that here we have all of our different passes, and by default, it usually sets it to Beauty, even though it might not show it here as none. So the first thing we want to do is we want to combine our diffuse and our indirect. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on our diffuse, and I'll go ahead and come over here and say Display Tool Output, so we can just kind of pop back and forth. And if I use my middle mouse to scroll back and forth and out, and holding down my space bar and left mouse to kind of scroll around, I can see this is very dark. And that's the thing, regardless of whether or not you have your lens shader on in Maya, it rendered out without that lens shader. So it requires that 1.5 gamma update in this program, but we're going to worry about that later. I'm going to leave it dark for now. So what do we got to do here? Well, I want to have optimum control of all of the different passes, so I can color correct each of them individually. So in order to do that, we're going to take this thing apart and build it up. So we're going to create what is called our diffuse plus indirect. So again, here I have my diffuse. I'm going to take this and I'll go ahead and hit edit file, or you can just right click and say copy and then right click and say paste. Seems duplicate doesn't work really well. These are the same file and they're both set to, as you can see here, diffuse. This one at the bottom, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to indirect. So here is the lighting that was caused by the IBL node, image-based lighting final gather. And this was caused by the actual directional lighting. So we're going to combine these two using what's called a blend and comp tool. So if we go to the pick list, we can see this tool we're going to be using a lot called blend and comp. And I'll go ahead and hold it down with my left mouse and drag it out and drop it into the scene. And this has two nodes. It has a front and it has a back node. And we'll get into these little nodes down here as far as masking. And we're going to put those together. So it doesn't matter which ones anywhere. I'll just go ahead and put this one to the back, this one to the top, and we're going to add this together. So if I go to the blend in comp and come to the option here, this is the on-off switch as far as blending. And under blending, I'm going to go ahead and switch this over to add. So now you can see here is our diffuse, here's our indirect, and here's the combination of both of them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and take one of these, and I'll just go ahead, again, copy, Control-C, Control-V, I can do that, and kind of leave this out here for another one. And I'm going to take these, and we're going to group them. So I'm going to hold it down, Shift-G, which is the same thing as right-clicking and just saying Group Visual. And that'll give me a nice little folder to keep this organized. And with that done, if I go under my group, in the corner here, I can name this. So I'll go ahead and name this diffuse _ indirect. So this is the combination of those, and there it is written out. Now let's go ahead and combine a reflection and our spec together. So with the same one selected, again, I'll hit Control-C, Control-V, and let's go ahead and jump into our options here, and let's pull up our reflection. There it is, very dark. And for this other one, we'll go ahead and put up our specular. So here they are together, and we're going to combine them the same way we did here. So again, I'm going to go ahead under my pick list and grab another blending comp. And again, doesn't matter which one goes in where, back or front. And let's go ahead and go to the blending comp. And as you can see here, we're going to go ahead and call this blending mode add. Now, front gain and back gain, the opacity is sort of like the add-on. If I want to take away my actual reflection, I can come in here on the blending comp, and this is kind of like the opacity. So this is kind of adding it together, as you can see. So with these together, let's go ahead and group them. So I'll go ahead and grab them, lasso grab them. And again, hit Shift-G, and we'll go ahead and name this group. It's good to keep these things organized in groups because you'll get confused as far as what is what. And if you don't know where it is, your roadmap is gone, so you have no idea where things are at. So spec plus reflect. Now, the final thing I want to do is I want to combine all of these together with one more add. So under the pick list, I'm going to go again create another blending comp. I'll put the indirect, bring it over here and bring it to the back, and put this one on top. And you guessed it, we're going to do add. So we're eventually coming back to what is known as our beauty pass. That's just something to be aware of. We're rebuilding all these just in case we want to color correct these individually. Say I don't like the reflections being too blue, I can color correct them individually here without affecting the specular color. Same thing with direct and indirect as far as coming in here, maybe there's too much blue in here. I can individually color correct these if I want to, and then not have to worry about getting any effect on the diffuse itself. All right, now we're going to deal with color correction. I'm going to go under my file import and grab a hold again into my passes, SHA-2, and here is our color code, and we'll bring that in. Now for color correction, we're going to use this as a mask for the R, G, and B as we move along. So we're going to use this little node called CC Basics. So I'll pull that one in. And the first thing we want to do is get ourselves back to that 1.5 gamma adjust. So I'll go ahead and put the output to the input here under input image. And the CC Basics, you have a master gamma, and if you want, you can go to shadow gamma, midtone, highlights, and so forth. But usually under master, under your gamma master here, we're going to set this to what we were doing in Maya, which was 1.5. And we can pre-adjust these as we go along. And I'll go ahead and name this. So if you go under your name, which is always in this tiny little corner over here, and I'll go ahead and call this gamma. Now, whenever you do color correction, you have to unmultiply, then remultiply over. Otherwise, you'll have weird edges if you don't do this. So we have to unmultiply the edges. In order to do that, we're going to go again into our pick list. And if we go under the channels, you can see pre-multiply, unmultiply. And first we need to unpremultiply. So I'll go ahead and grab that one. And what you can also do when you grab these, you can actually hold them over where the little lines are. I'll go ahead and do that, and it kind of comes in there. Or you can hold down Alt and have them kind of come out. And if you hold down Alt again and drag it in, they kind of connect, which is really nice. Again, a very nice feature. So now that we're in the unpremultiplied state, all of our color correction will work good without giving us weird black edges when we eventually do the comp to the pre-multiply back onto the original plate. So with that said, let's go ahead and add a few more of these for color correction. Again, this is all for control. And again, I'll just come in here under CC Basics, and I'll grab 3 of these. So again, I can grab this, Control C, Control V again, and now I have 3 of these. So let's go ahead and connect these in. So here is my output, and that goes into the input, and so on and so forth. And finally, at the end, we can go ahead and put a pre-mult because we're done with the color correction. And I'll go ahead and put that in here. So we're good. Now, what are these 3 right here? Well, they're going to be the RGB colors, so we can isolate color correct the tires, the glass, and the body itself. So we'll go ahead and call this one under the actual CC Basics. And I want to know what it is, so I'll keep that CC around. CC underscore body. And for this one, we'll call it CC glass. And we'll go ahead and call this one CC tires, RGB. We know that the R is the body, the G is the glass, which we can't see right now, and the B for blue is the actual tires. So we're using the color information, which would go into these masks, as you can see here, this little black icon. So all I have to do is plug this into the little black pieces. And if I go under the body here, under masking, I can choose channel red. Glass, as you can see here, under masking, we're going to choose green. And tires, we're going to go ahead and choose blue. So what does this do? Well, as you can see here, I can come in under the body, and under the basics, I can take the gamma and I can adjust only certain areas, which is really nice because sometimes I want my tires to be a little bit darker. So I'll go under here, under tires, and kind of bring those down and so forth. Again, all the color adjustments are things I'm going to take care of later on in the comp, but I just want to set those up for now. And lastly, let's go ahead and take all this and make a nice group for it. So I'll go ahead and grab all these and go ahead and do Shift G, and we're going to go ahead and call this Color Correct Body. Voila. All right, now for our alpha. I'm going to go to my File, Import, and let's go ahead and bring in that mask attack. And we're going to be using the alpha information, or not the alpha information, the luminance information of this, not this alpha or whatever's going on here as far as this black, but just the white values is what's going to be important. I'm also going to get under channel set alpha. I'm going to bring that in. And what this does is basically give us a new alpha, or reassign a new alpha. So the top portion is the image, and the bottom portion is the actual alpha. And right now it's set to receive alpha, so it's just taking the alpha of this image. We don't want that. We want the black and white information. So under set alpha, we're going to switch this over to Luma. So as you can see, everything looks good, except it brightened up a little bit. And if we look real close, we can see checkerboard transparency through our object here. And that is just a problem that I've seen. And for some reason, it doesn't render out absolute white sometimes with these alphas or these luminance values. So what I have to do is I have to go under the remap color, under color management, and I'll drag that on there. And I'll go ahead and hold down 1 for set alpha so that that stays there, and right click here under my viewer and make sure I'm set to C1 output. And we're going to adjust this and it'll update over here. So what we have to do is we kind of have to crush those whites so that it gets to the point where there's no longer transparency. So in my Inmax, I'm going to start pulling this backward and crushing it to the point where the whites get blown out to the point where we no longer have transparency. So it looks like we're in the safe zone. If we have not done this, we would have had a serious problem with everything from motion blur to depth of field and so forth. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at our alpha. And we're going to move ahead here to a frame, say 172. And here's an issue that we're having here, the glass itself. If we look back at our original image, and I'll go ahead and take a look at it by holding down 1 on this one. It's pure white because we assigned everything the surface shader. But we want to also just be able to inherit the transparency that's coming from the actual window here. So we want to add a little bit of that. So in order to get that back, there's one way that we can do that. And that is through, again, a blend in comp. So I'll go ahead and put a blend in comp up here. And I'm going to go ahead and connect the alpha to the blend in comp. I'm going to take the remap color and I'm going to put that as the back. And for the front, I'm going to start where we did the pre-multiply. And it's going to give us this weird result here, but we want to just use a mask. So we know that we've created a mask using the green color of this attack color code. So I'll kind of bring that over to our little black masking. And we got to jump over here into blend and comp. And what I'm going to choose is under the compositing, we're not going to choose over, we're going to use cutout. So the green channel is going to cut out this right here. We're going to adjust the opacity. Again, nothing looks like it's changed until we jump over to masking and make sure that channels are set to green. And as we take a look at this, and I'll go ahead and show you, if I go intensity, nothing changes. If I go back to blend and comp and take my front gain and bring it all the way back to 0, I can see that it goes through now. We have a nice transparency. So we adjust this as far as transparency under the intensity in the mask. So if I come in here and bring this to 0, we're back to where we were. If I bring this to 1, we have a complete see-through. So we want to set this roughly right now to say 0.42 so we get that nice transparency in there. So with that said, let's go ahead and group these. I'll kind of come in here. You can see it starts to get crazy with these noodles, but you'll get used to it after a while. And I'll go ahead and grab these and hit Shift-G. And let's go ahead and name this Alpha Setup. All right, now I want to add, before we move on, something called a spec kick. Sometimes specularity seems to lose itself, even if I've added it way back in the beginning. But I'd like to add over another spec of the body. So I'll go ahead and go under File, Import, under the body, bring in an attack. We'll add a CC Basics for gamma correction and a blend and comp, like so. So I'll just pull out my extension here. And what you can do is, if I want to grab a hold of this kind of in between here, is I can bring this blend and comp again and hold down Alt, and it'll pop on there, as you can see. And then we'll just go ahead and plug this into my CC Basics, and then the output to the front. And again, for the option, I want to switch this over to the spec. So there's the spec. Under the CC Basics, we want to go ahead and shoot this up to a ridiculous gamma of something like 6. You can start to see the intensity of this, depending on how high you want this to actually go. And then under the blend and comp, we want to make sure that we are doing a add. And we'll bring down the opacity, because that's a little too hot, as you can see, to something like 0.37. So there's a little bit of a kick, and again, we can adjust this later on, but this is what I like to call a spec kick, and I'll go ahead and Shift-G this and call it spec kick. All right, next up is depth of field blur, and this will have to show what is in focus and what is out of focus. So let's go ahead and build that. I'll go ahead under File, Import, and bring in one of our body attack again. And with this, we go under Options, and we're going to choose Depth. Now, if we take a look at this, it looks just like complete white information, but it's a 32-bit image, and there is information in here. We just can't see it yet. So the first thing we need to do is to rewire the Z or alpha information into the color information. So I'll go ahead and go in here under Rewire, grab one of those, and I'll plug that in. And I want to rewire the red, green, and blue channel to be plugged into the alpha. And if I go ahead and check it in here, it still looks like there's no information. But if you check really clearly by hitting Alt and P, you'll get up your color picker, and you can see that there is information here as far as depth. The farther back, we're at about 67. At the front, we're about 36. So there is an actual range of color pixels here. This is a 32-bit image, so we're going above the 0 and 1 range of an 8-bit image. So just to be aware of that. The next thing I want to do is go back and jump into that rewire tool, or I'm sorry, the remap color, as we used earlier. And I'll go ahead and plug that in. And we want to take those ranges that we roughly got as far as what was the closest foreground, what was the farthest background pixel from our color picker. So I'm going to go ahead as far as the in-max and choose 35, and the in-min 35, and the in-max set to 77. So as we can kind of see, if I go ahead and click on it now under 1, we got this range here, so I can kind of see if I pull this back, I start getting to pure black, and I want to pull this back basically until I get everything that's kind of at the beginning here. I don't want to have flat black all the way like right here. I want to get the full range from front to back. So with that set up, we can use this information to drive what is in focus and what is out of focus. So if I go to my pick list, we're going to go ahead and add a blur. And for the blur itself, we're going to take the set alpha here. This is where our original file is, and plug that into our input image. And we're going to take the output of this remap and plug that into what is called the modulation image. You'll see modulation image and you'll see forward vectors. We're going to get into this forward vector later. It has to do with motion blur, but this is depth of field blur. So I'm going to go ahead and plug that under modulation. So if we go ahead and take a look at it and go under modulation for the blur itself, we can see that nothing has changed. But if I take my radius up to say something like, let's go a little bit of extreme here, to 7, you start to see that certain areas are in and out of focus. And I can change that offset by grabbing this dabber and choosing what I want to have in focus. So I can kind of click back here, and now the background's in focus and the foreground is out of focus. So there you go. So one other thing you notice is there's this harsh edge here, and that's solved just by taking your max radius and putting it up to 20, and that sort of blurs it out. You can go a little higher if things are a little bit crazier, but I think you're pretty good. Min always stays pretty much the same. This is a little too much for the scene. We shot this outside, and we really had to stop down lens because of the brightness of the day. So due to that, there's going to be very little lack of depth of field. It's going to be very, very in focus. So for now, I'll leave my max radius to 4, and we'll just go ahead and fix that later. If I ever want to turn this off, I can just hit this little button here, and it sort of holds it to turn off for now. It's sort of like a temporal turn off if I don't want to see it in there. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and Shift G it, and we'll go ahead and name this the depth of field setup. While we're at it, let's go ahead and take the blur and name that depth of field blur. Now, what I like to add, because this can be an issue and will come up later, is the ability to have a little bit of an eat off of the edge of the actual harvester itself. So in order to do that, I'm going to go ahead and hold down my middle mouse button and then move to my right to go to the pick list. And I want to come over here and look for something called edge. And if you go under alpha, you'll see it right here. I'll go ahead and drag that out, and I'll put it between the set alpha and the depth of field blur. And later on, we can come in here if we want to adjust this and eat into the edge a little bit. It gives you basically 3 options. You have shrink, which shrinks it, erode, which sort of does a feathering, and blur, which blurs the actual alpha itself. So that comes in handy later on and will as we continue to composite this. All right, now we're going to create the motion blur. And the first thing I want you to realize is whenever we're dealing with motion blur or depth of field blur, the pass itself must have all the alpha from what we get over here. So in order to do that, we're just going to go ahead and take this set alpha, hit Control-C, Control-V, and we know this is set to Luma. And it's real easy. I'm going to hold down Alt, drag this in so it kind of pops in here. And we'll go ahead and set the alpha to what we created back here. So now we get a nice depth of field alpha. So I'm going to go ahead and say File, Import, and we're going to go to Body and get another tack in there. This time we're going to switch this one over to the MV3D Motion Blur Pass, which has this really cool blue on here. And again, we have to create the alpha, so Control-C, Control-V, plug that in, and plug this over here for the alpha, so we get that nice clean alpha. So into our pick list, we're going to grab another blur, and we're going to name this Motion Blur. And we're going to plug the output of this into our forward vectors, and then the depth of field into the image input. Now, do not confuse the difference between depth of field and the motion blur. If I come over here to my motion blur, I might want to come under it and turn it off for now, just so I know what is what here, because we've got 2 blurs working here. So I'll go over here to my motion blur, and we'll be able to look at it separately. So if I go under vectors, this is where we're going to deal with this. We never change the width, we always just change the length. So I'll go ahead and add a little bit here, say 2.4, bring it up a little bit. And if I come over here to my max radius, I'll set this to 15. And right now there's not a lot of motion blur going on. Now, how do I know there's motion blur? But under view vectors, I can click on this and hit display scale, kind of pull it down. You can start to see the intensity of where everything's going. We've got a motion of the tires spinning here, so there is motion blur going on. And it's probably not until we get to a farther frame here where you can start to see the craziness here. Kind of pull these interval scales back. You can see the tires are spinning. This is moving. You can see the motion blur happening. I'll go ahead and turn this off for now. But it is going on. I can check it by kind of tabbing this back and forth. Again, make sure your max radius is set up higher, or else you're going to get that kind of defined edge. So we will be able to combo these two now if we want. So I think for now, I'll go ahead and take this and turn it off, just so we know that we have it set up correctly. And as you can see, it's kind of muted dark here, just to let you know that everything is kind of off for now. So that right there is just the motion blur. And again, the length is what's going to establish the amount of motion blur. And for us, I believe we're going to stick with something pretty small for now, like say 0.25. This doesn't usually go anything higher than 0.2 to maybe 0.7 or 0.8. The average is usually about 0.4, 0.3. All right, now we're going to switch traffic lanes and start working on our original plate shot by adding shadows and puddles and so forth. So I'm going to go ahead under File, Import, and we're going to bring in my Shot2 Uncompressed, which is the TIFF format or target format that is actually high resolution. It's not a proxy, it's not a JPEG or anything like that. And the first thing we got to realize is we rendered everything out at 1280 by 720. We have to resize this. As you can see, it's huge. It's 1920 by 1080. And for the sake of this project, we want to get this down to 1280 by 720 just for preview and purposes and distribution. So I'm going to go ahead under my pick list and get a resize tool. So I'll just go ahead and middle mouse drag and go pick list. And if you go under formatting, you'll get a resize tool. I'll just pull that out and I'll go ahead and plug that in. And if I go ahead and hold down 1 on that one, we want to adjust this, as you can see, to 1280 by 720. What this did initially was it looked at our output settings. So if I come to my output settings, it looked at this right here. And if I come in here, it went ahead already and matched it to the format of our file. So you can see here, we're now in correlation with the size of what's up here. First we want to do is add those puddles. So we'll go ahead and do that. I'll go ahead and say File, Import, and under Passes for shot number 2, let's go ahead and find puddles and hit Import. So here's the puddles. Let's go ahead and take a look at them. They have an alpha, and here is the reflection of the harvester as it passes by. So the first thing we want to do is add a blur to this. And I'll go ahead and plug that into the input image. Hold down 1 on that one so we see it over here. And if we take a look at the blur, we mess with modulation, we mess with vectors. The original blur is your typical Gaussian blur. So we'll go ahead and add a 2.5 blur on that. So there's a little bit of blurriness. And I'll go ahead again, under my pick list, bring in our old classic blend and comp. And we'll go ahead and plug this on the top and stick this on the bottom. So as you can see, things are pretty dark, and chances are they might need a little bit of a gamma correct in here. So let's go ahead and under our CC Basics, pull that in, stick it right about there. And under our gamma, let's go ahead and bring it up so that it is about 1.5 in there. So I want to take this and do a couple things here. In reality, I just want to bring the opacity down. So I'll go ahead and bring this down. You can see if I bring it down totally, I just want something there so that it's recognizable. So I'm probably going to bring this down to something like 0.38 so that there is something visible in there. And you will notice when we play through the animation, you'll notice that as the harvester kind of flies over, you'll start to see there's a subliminal or subconscious thing that goes in your mind, and it works. So let's go ahead and take this and group it. I'll grab these, hit Shift-G. Always important to name and organize. And we'll just call this puddles. All right, now for the ground shadows, let's go ahead and jump into File, Import, Ground Shadows, Attack, and hit Import. And let's go ahead and duplicate this twice. So I'll hit Control-C, Control-V. And what we can do about this second one here is we can go ahead and choose MV3D. So we can see this has the motion blur for the ground, and here's the motion blur, because we want to have the ground motion blurred as well. So the first thing we want to make sure we have on here is a CC Basics, because we have to color correct this actual black ground to match up with the color of our shadow on our actor, which is more blue due to the sky and so forth. So that's something to be aware of. And the second thing we want to do again is add the motion blur tool. So again, I'm going to rename this Motion Blur Ground. And I'll plug the out of this into the forward vectors. So I'll go ahead and come over here and plug that in. So that was our forward vectors, and take whatever we get color corrected and pull this as output image to input image. Let's go ahead and turn on the motion blur just so we can see it. So if I come over here to the blur under vectors and we can kind of set this up. I'll go ahead and make this something like 0.4. In fact, we should be going back to and adjusting ourselves according to what the motion blur settings are here. So we're looking at a 0.25 for now, and we can do that. So I'll go ahead and come in here and set this to 0.25 for the length and set our max radius to 15. So with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the difference here. And you can't really see it too well, but there is motion blur going on. I'll kind of show it to you. And when the scene gets a little crazier, you'll probably pick it up a lot easier. For right now, this is a very steady scene of the actor moving under the actual harvester. So under the CC Basics, let's go ahead and do a blend and comp for this so we can see what's going on. So I'll hit blend and comp. And again, we're going to take this back and take the output of this to the front and hit 1 on that. So already I can see we've got a huge difference in opacity as well as color. So what I can do is I can go to my CC Basics here and I can do a couple things. One, I can first take down the opacity of the blend and comp because that's a little bit too high. So I'm going to bring it down a little bit. And then I'll just go back to my CC Basics. And what I usually go for is my blue channel offset. And I'll go ahead and adjust it ever so slightly so that I get a nice equal blue hue with the shadow itself. And again, this is all something that we can deal with later on. So with that said, let's go ahead and group these for ground shadow. Shift G, come over here. Let's call this ground shadow. All right, now for our light wrap. And light wrap is kind of hard to find. If you hold down your middle mouse button and go to your right to the pick list, you'll find a macro. You can drag that out. And if you look at the macro under load, you'll find that there is an option for light wrap. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And the first thing we're going to do is plug in the input image, which would be right here. Bring that through. And we want to have the background, which is here. What this does is it basically feathers the edges of the actual backplate around the actual harvester. And doing so blends it into the image so it doesn't look like a cookie cutout on top. So I'll go ahead and show you what that creates. So here is C1, and we can see what it does. It just kind of feathers in the actual backplate or whatever is being plugged into the input image. Now, again, this is kind of not really good to understand or to see until we actually composite this onto our actual backplate. So it's a combination of compositing this on top of our backplate. So let's go ahead and do that. If I go under my pick list and add another blend and comp, I'm going to take this and I'm going to add this on top of the original. So again, I go ahead and grab my original, which is right here, put that to the back, and I'm going to take this and add it to the front. If we take a look at that, that's what we get. So here's the difference between holding down 1 here and here. We get this nice feathered edge. I'll go ahead and show that to you again. So I'll click 1 here, and if I want, I could show you guys can also hold down the number 2 and then go back and forth by holding your cursor over this area and holding down 1 and 2. So you can kind of see the difference. So I'll go ahead and click out of that and just make this 1. So there's a few options you have under your light wrap, and that's the blur of your alpha. And if you increase this, you can see how crazy it gets, kind of eats in pretty hard there. We're going to leave this at 5. The amount actually eats in so much that it just gets a little insane, as you can see. So with that said, let's go ahead and set this to something like 0.5. We want this to be real subtle. And the blur background basically takes this background image and blurs it, and it depends on whether or not you want that or not. Again, I'll just go ahead and set it to something like 10. So it's actually blurring this original plate image, and that's what's coming around the edges here. So this, as you can see, is our new light wrap, which is a lot thinner and not as in your face as it was before. And what we have now is a finished light wrap with our image here. Now let's go ahead and finally marriage the two, backplate and the final product. So again, we had another blending comp. Again, you're going to get used to blending 1,000 of these things. And we'll go ahead and take this and set it to the front. And finally, we can set this to the back. So here's the back. We plug it in down here. Here's our plate. And here's the combination, finally, of everything kind of hooked together, as you can see. And the order of this is so important. If we screw up the order with this, you can have problems. If you do your motion blur before your color correction or your motion blur after your light wrap, you're going to have errors and everything's going to look weird along the edges. So I'm going to go ahead and take this right here and go ahead and shift group them. Make sure we label everything here. And I'll make that my light wrap. And next up is we're going to actually add the ground dust. So I'm going to go ahead under File, Import, and this time we're going to go under our passes, and we're going to go ahead and choose our particles. So here is our particles. I'll go ahead and hit File, Import. And the first thing we want to do is unmultiply this. And I'm going to go ahead and comp this in without it. So let's go ahead and do that first. I'll hit my blend and comp, put it up here, and I'll plug this in for the front, this for the back. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. Now at first we kind of look at the two and we're seeing a little bit of something. I'll go ahead and kind of peruse through here and show you that as I come on here, you're not going to see them too well. And you're also going to see like a black halo around them. And if I go ahead and take a look at the dust here, we need to unmultiply this because it'll be more defined. So if I take my unpremultiply and I just drag it in here, you can see the difference now. I'll go ahead and show it to you. So if I hold this as 1, come back to my premult, and then hide it and turn it off, there's a world of difference as far as having that on. Now the other thing we want to do is motion blur this as well. Again, these are all subtleties, and you might think, oh, do we really have to motion blur this? And I would say yes. So in order to do that, again, let's go ahead and grab a blur. So I'll go ahead and take this motion blur, hit Control-C, Control-V, so it's got all our settings exactly the same. And while we're at it, let's go ahead and turn it on so we can see it. And I'll drop that in, holding down Alt. And we got to plug this into something. So what can we plug in for this ground? Well, we already know that this image over here works just as good. So for the forward vectors, let's plug that in. So I'll bring this over, drag it into the actual forward vectors. So now I'll go ahead and kind of come in here and show you. If I go ahead and come in here and hit on and off, there's actual motion blur going on. So all these little added little details will start adding up as we move along in the actual comp. So with that, let's go ahead and group this, and we'll call it particles, and we're all set. All right, now for that grand explosion. Let's go ahead and do File, Import, and go to Explosion, hit Import. First thing we want to do is make sure we're on our proper time range here. I was guesstimating so far, but I know that the last frame officially here is 342, and I know that an explosion occurs on frame 228. So if I kind of come to it, I can see it kind of popping up in there. Now if I go ahead and jump over to my blend and comp and drag that in, I'll go ahead and take the explosion and put it at the front and put this to the back. And the first thing that happens is people look at this and say, well, there's a little bit of a black halo here, and they try to edge it out around the edges. And again, the one thing I always tell them is to come in here with a unpremultiply and stick it on there, and that will help with the edges, as you can see here. And again, you can use your edge tool if you want to eat around the edges if you still think there's a little bit of a halo going on, as you can see here. So with that said, let's go ahead and keep adding on here. I want to create a CC Basics for color correction. And I want to add a blur. And last but not least, I want to convert this from a 32-bit image to an 8-bit image. If this is 16 or 32, it needs to go down to an 8-bit image. I want to finish on 8. So in order to do that, again, my original object, my targa, my backplate, is actually an 8-bit image. So if we're sandwiching 32-bit images with 8-bit, we're going to get little red dot artifacts around here that you're not going to pick up unless you actually do a render. So in order to fix that, we're going to go over here to Convert Depth, and we're going to create a few of those. I'm going to put that in here. And what that's going to do is going to make the 32 into an 8. You can already see a little bit of a change there. And again, it's a subtle change of range of color. So I'm going to Control-C, Control-V, bring this over here. And I want to create another one of these where we marriage the harvester with the backplate, which is right here. So this stuff is 32. So I'm going to hold down Alt and drag that in. And now we have 8 and 8. The reason why we kept in 32 all the way down this pipeline is to stretch the color, color correction, depth of field, 32-bit information, all this stuff to manipulate the colors. Again, pipeline is a big issue when it comes to what is in order, as you can see. So right now we're just kind of crushing everything down to 8 at this point. And let's start moving around here. I'll go to this right here, my CC Basics. Let's go ahead and bring down the saturation a little bit. It's a little too much, a little too cartoony for my tastes. And then for the blur, Because this is far away, we want to put a little bit of depth of field blur in here. And we'll go ahead and add a 1.7 blur Gaussian. So it's a little bit far out there. And again, for the actual basics, let's go back and bring down the gamma a little bit. Maybe bring down the gain so it has a serious dark explosion feel to it. So there we go. Go ahead and Shift G that. And we'll go ahead and call it explosion.